Hi, this is Dustine from Two Lucky Cats. I want to show you today how you can make wrapping paper using the stamps that we made. If you haven't made the stamps yet, you can go to our website, twoluckycats.com, and download the instruction sheet that'll tell you how to make the stamps, and you can watch the video that goes with it. The most important thing for having a successful outcome for this project is to make sure that you get the right kind of paper to use for wrapping paper. You have to have a paper that's not so thin that it's going to rip if you try to wrap with it, but also it can't be real thick, because then it'll be hard to use it as a wrapping paper. On the instruction sheet that I've created for this video, I do give you the name of a paper that works well. And I've also included sources where you can find it, either online or in a store locally. This is some of the paper. It comes in a big roll. It's 48 inches by 50 feet. And as you can see, you can make a whole lot of wrapping paper with this roll of paper. But I'm sure there's plenty of other projects you can also use it for. The paper also comes in sheets that are 12 inches by 18 inches. So that may be a better choice depending on how big the wrapping paper is that you need to make. I chose white paper because then I can have a lot of different choices in terms of the background color of the paper, because I can color the background using acrylic paint. Now, before you start cutting big sheets of paper to do your wrapping paper, what I always do is I cut smaller pieces so I can experiment with different color combinations or the placement of the stamps. For example, you want to make sure that you have enough contrast between the background and the color of the stamps to make sure that the stamps are going to show up on the paper. And the other thing you want to experiment with is the placement of the stamps. For example, when I used the stamp for the butterflies, I thought about butterflies in the ground that were flying up from the ground into the air. So I kind of just I started at the bottom and I made random placements of the butterflies flying up the paper. And then I just started from the bottom and went up and then across the paper. So that's one way you can place the stamps, is in some kind of a random pattern. Now, another way that you can place the stamps is to have like alternating rows. So the first thing I do is just start here in the corner and then figure out like how far apart you want your stamps. Then when you do the first row, then you can come down here and place start your second row of stamps, have the stamp in the middle. And then you can put them the same distance apart as you did the top row, and then just do that row. So the rows are alternating. Then when you want to do the next row, you do it the same way as the first. And of course you have to figure out how far apart you want to have each row. And then you do the first row the same as the second, and the second row the same as the fourth. And then alternate those patterns all the way down the sheet. The other way you can do it is just start in the corner, like I did with this one, although I decided I didn't like this particular combination. But you can start in the corner and then figure out how far apart you want each stamp, and then just do them in a row, one after another. And then again figure out how far apart each row will be, and then just line up each stamp with the one next to it, and do that all the way down until you come to the end of the page. So those are three different ways that you can organize the stamps on your paper, and you really just have to experiment to see what you like and what doesn't like, because sometimes the idea I get in my head doesn't turn out anything like I think it's going to. So you can save paper and paint by doing it on a smaller scale and seeing what it looks like. I'd like to give you some tips on how to apply the paint. I just use a sponge to apply the paint to the different stamps here, both types of stamps. And I also use, for this paper, I used a sponge to apply the paint to the background color. when you're going to use sponge, these sponges can dry out, so you want to put them in water, but you want to make sure that you wring out any excess water, both in the stamps and the stamps that you're going to apply the paint with. If you get too much water in the acrylic paint, it's you're going to have more problems with smearing, and you won't get good crisp details from either doing the background or from your stamps. Now, to do the background, what I did here on these particular papers was I just used colors that were maybe one that was a little darker or a little lighter, and then I just stamped all over the background sheet of paper. And I found it easier to do it in fours to cover the whole paper. And you can decide how much white you want to show through. But whenever you have the background stamp of the paper, and working with acrylic, one thing I found is acrylic paints dry very quickly. So soon after you're done stamping the background color onto the paper, it's probably going to be dry enough to iron it. And another good characteristic of the paper that I'm using is that you can iron it, because once you've done the stamping, a lot of times it'll have like little lumps and wrinkles in it. So if you want to smooth it out again, all you have to do is turn the paper over to the other side and turn your iron on to the lowest setting. And then I just iron it, keep the iron moving on one side, then I turn it around and do it on the other side. And that'll take out all the wrinkles and lumps and bumps. So once the paper is flat again, then you can do the stamping on top. Now, if I'm using one of these stamps that we've made out of the compressed sponges, I get some of the acrylic paint, and I probably use a paper plate or something as a palette, and just get some of the paint on it, and just evenly distribute the paint over your stamp. Then when I want to stamp, once I've decided where I was going to position my stamps, I just put it down, and then with my hand I just press down firmly all over and then lift it up, because you want to make sure that you get all the paint uniformly over the area that you're stamping with. And then I just pick it up straight so you don't get any smearing. And then, of course, every time you stamp, you have to apply more paint. Now, when I use this type of stamp, the stamp that we created with the foam, again, I just use a sponge, and I just make sure that I have an even distribution of the paint over the stamp. And then what I try to do is just lay it down flat, and then uniformly try to put pressure all over the stamp. So again, you'll get a uniform stamp, and then just pick it up straight so you don't get any smearing. Now, another thing that I did when I was using this stamp is about every 5 or 6 times that I used it, I just wiped all the paint off with a paper towel, and then applied some more paint. Because if you get too much paint in some spots, it can the stamp can move around and smear some of the paint. So I found if I cleaned the stamp off, that would help with that. And then, you know, when you're done with the stamps, so you can use them again, you just need to clean everything off with a damp paper towel. And of course, rinse the paint off your the sponge stamps. Once you're done with your stamping, then you can just iron your paper again to smooth out any wrinkles or bumps in it. Again, iron it on the lowest heat setting. You don't need to spray it with water or anything. And just go on one side, keep your iron moving, and then turn it around once, and then just go over it again. And then the paper will be ready to use as wrapping paper. As you can see, here's some presents that I've wrapped using the paper that we created with the stamps. And I think they look pretty good. If you give somebody a present wrapped in this paper, I think that they would be impressed. I hope you enjoy doing this project. We have many more projects that we're working on. Come back and see us often at twoluckycats.com.